With my winning smiles and my living legend and flair style, I just can't help but stab myself a fair. I'm your McGregor, Will McGregor, Makoko, Morocco, bebop, hip hop, and a flip flop. Somebody stop me! Pretty really, your faces of live. Don't tell a dime a dozen. I stand out of a crowd. They made me, yeah, they broke the mold. Mostly kind, staying divine. Totally out of my mind. Oh, villain and Ned Welsh. I don't want to decorate prison cells. Bring out anything I say. But there's one last thing I gotta sing about. Open up wide and really shout. Oh, look out! This is the mask. Smoking! Hello, everybody. This is a multi-voice reviewer who found himself a mask and become the mask himself. Hey! So, the review I'm gonna be doing for you today, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, happy April 1st, so April Fools! But the movie I'm going to review for you today is The Mask. So, what can I say about this green-faced, devilishly handsome man? Actually, what can you say? Some people say it's a combined mixture between a superhero and a supervillain. That's right. Some people say that he is a mixture between two DC characters, the Creeper and the Joker. Ooh, I don't want any of that creep in my area. I don't want him to keep saying, "Why so serious?" But I like the Creeper on my side, because I like his style. And for those of you who don't know who the Creeper is, you should look it up, for you non-comic book literates. But here's the thing. There's a fine line difference between The Mask the movie Mask the movie and Mask the comic book. Not many people know that the comic book was actually made back in 1991. I'm not kidding. But it's very different. The comic book itself was very gory and violent. So I wouldn't recommend you kids reading it. Don't blame me. Blame your parents because they're not being good parents. And if your parents trying to blame it on me, sue me. Actually, don't sue me because I can't enter the scene without any green. Maybe one of these days I should put a little stop. But for those of you who don't believe that it's very gory, thank goodness I printed this scene from the comic black and white, so you won't see the blood. But if it's in color, oh, you'll see it. In this scene of the comic, you can see Walter, the big henchman from the cartoon, makes an appearance in the comics. And this is what he's been doing. Cutting his skin just to freak out the gangsters. Going all... Are you still strong enough? Huh? But here is the thing, ladies and gentlemen. The comic book himself was a lot darker than what you expect. Unlike Jim Carrey's Stanley Ipkiz, in the comic book, it's way different. You see, this is what Stanley Ipkiz looks like in the comics. Nothing like Jim Carrey. And he found the mask not out in the lake next to the bridge. He found the mask in a pawn shop. Well, actually an antique shop, but what's the difference? But of course, the biggest difference between the comic book and the movie, Stanley Ipkiz was a human punching bag. Anybody who came towards him, they just treated him like he's nothing. Now he has thoughts about taking vengeance on those who did him wrong. But here's the biggest thing. Unlike the movie where his love interest is Tina Carlo, starring that sexy Cameron Diaz, Hot! I do have to admit, I had a huge crush on Cameron Diaz ever since I saw the movie. But now, since I've seen her what she looks like now, way too many facelifts. It's like she's trying to remove one of her masks. But in the actual comic book, Stanley Ipkiz, he already have a girlfriend. And her name is Kathy. Hubba, hubba. Now, she likes him the way he is. It's just too bad nobody else does. Now, how the story goes is like this. When Stanley Ipkiz, he had a feeling that the mask was telepathically communicating with him, telling him to put him on. And I thought it was one of Kathy's tricks, since he was going to the bathroom and saw the mask right in front of him, going like, ah! Okay, I'll trick him. I'll trick her. I'll put on the mask, and then, bam! He become the mask. But, unlike the movie where he said, it's incredible. With these powers, I can be a superhero. I can fight crime and protect the innocents. What for world peace? Instead, he stuck with, but first. He didn't think about becoming a superhero. He was thinking about it as a second thought, but right now, he had bigger fish to fry. Remember, now, I would say that the difference between the comic book and the movie here. Remember those car repairmen who stiffed him? Well, unlike the movie where he grabbed two tailpipes and shoved them up their bum-bums, well, in the comic book, he just straight up murdered those guys. I mean, he shoved car parts into their bodies, and they were all chained up and bleeding to death. And even there was one guy who had a tailpipe shoved not in his backside, but in his front side. So pretty much his head was shaped as the tailpipe. Ugh. Whew. And if you remember that one scene where he sees a bunch of gangsters, and he pulled out a black balloon and turned it into a Tommy gun, and then he fired the gun while the gang scat. Well, in the comic book, he did the same thing, but the gangster didn't run away. He pumped their guts full of lead. And surprisingly, you know the cop, Calloway from the movie? He is in the comic book, playing the cop who's trying to solve this murder case that Stanley Ipkiz had done. But here's one thing you should know. In the movie, he's called himself the Mask, but in the comic books, he's called the Big Head Killer. That's interesting. Well, and you think he just continued on killing people, becoming a villain in the movie? Don't worry, he died at the end of the series. I'm not kidding. And here's something I printed out. You see, Stanley Ipkiz, he had one person on his hit list, so he creeped up back to his apartment to get the mask, but it turns out, there's Stanley Ipkiz, and then bam! Kathy wore the mask and shot him. And that was the end of Stanley Ipkiz. But not the mask itself. You see, Kathy knew how powerful and dangerous the mask is, so she went into the police station to give it to Calloway. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, that happened in Return of the Mask. I like posting on comic books. Especially has a big green guy here. Anyway, Kathy warned Calloway not to wear the mask. Of course, he thought she was delusional because of the death of her boyfriend. But as he put on the mask, boom, he became the mask himself. And unlike Stanley Ipkiz, who's taken revenge and taken revenge on those who stiffed him, Calloway decided to use the mask to do good with it. So pretty much he dealt with a bunch of bad guys and gangsters who keeps on doing a lot of crime, and of course the cops trying to stop him. Until his partner told him to stop and try to have him arrested, Calloway put a dynamite in his partner's mouth, about ready to light it, until he finally stopped and discovered, wait a minute, what am I doing? I'm going way too far. This mask is really dangerous. So, at the end of the story, he took off his mask. He took off his mask and buried it in cement in the basement floor. But that didn't stop right there, because a bunch of mobsters start showing up in Calloway's apartment. And as he was about ready to dig the mask out, the bunch of gangsters shot him right in the back. But he didn't die. He just ended up in a hospital in a coma. And as a bunch of gangsters decided to make fun with that mask, he put the mask on one of his less strong gangsters with a stutter. But as they put the mask on the weak one, he became the big shot. And now he starts running the entire mob gang. Unlike Stanley Ipkiz, who used it for vengeance, Calloway used it for good. Now the gangster's using it to take over the underworld. And he showed up on a mobster's wedding uninvited, where all the big shots were at, got himself an atomic bomb, and they're all dead except him. He was still alive. Now, Kathy knew that the mask is too dangerous. So, the only way she can stop this is she decided to meet the next mask. Oh, my Franken calls! I feel like, honestly, every time when somebody always dings me in the middle of my review, I get so annoying here. Anyway, back on the story. Kathy decided to make himself look hot and get the mobster's attention. And after she convinced him to take off the mask, boom. She finally took the mask away from him and killed the mobster. So now she's dealing with a bunch of mobsters who's trying to kill her until they call for Walter, an unstoppable Frankensteinish-looking guy. And after Kathy and Walter kept going into a non-stop fight, Kathy was like an unstoppable force, while Walter is an immovable object. Bam! And of course, when Kathy had enough, she decided to take the mask off and gave it to Walter. But Walter refuses. She said, "What the crap is wrong with you? Take the mask!" He was like, So, Kathy tossed the mask away, and that was the end of the mask return. And Calloway was alive and well. Oh yeah, that's one thing. You see, Calloway knew where Kathy was at, so he rammed his car right through the warehouse and hit Walter where his car and Walter went underwater. But Walter is an unstoppable killing machine. He can't die. He's like Frankenstein. Now, back in 1994, this movie became a huge success. And since the comic book was very gory and violent, they decided to make the movie more lighthearted and kid-friendly. Although that was Jim Carrey's ad-lib. When he was doing the balloon trick, he pulled out a condom and said, "Sorry, wrong pocket. For you, son!" And of course, a little-known fact, the Coco Bungo Club, that's the club Jim Carrey owns before he had the role in the movie, and decided to put the Coco Bungo Club in the movie. And of course, there are some deleted scenes in the movie. Like there's an alternate opening where there's a bunch of Vikings trying to bury the mask. And then there was a deleted scene where Peggy Brandt, the news reporter, who betrayed him, there was that scene where it did got dark in that deleted scene, where the evil bad guy named Dorian puts on the mask, picks her up, and tosses her into the printing press, where she gets smushed. And now there's a lot of newspapers with her face looking like this. And the print was in blood, saying another reporter died in the printing press. Now that was pretty dark, if you ask me. And of course they said that the origin of the mask belonged from one of the Norse god, probably Loki. Here's one thing I want to know. Why can't they do a comic book of the mask meet Thor? Would be pretty interesting. What's his head who plays Thor on the Avengers? What's his head who plays Loki on the Avengers meet somebody who wore the mask? But I think it'll be a while until Dark Horse and Marvel decide to make that crossover. Right now, Dark Horse been doing some crossovers with DC. But anyway, all in all, this was a good movie. Now, there were rumors talking about they were going to make The Mask 2, but sadly it was canceled. Heck, even Jim Carrey was keen to play The Mask again in the sequel. But sadly, it was a no-go. But one thing I say, it's close to a sequel. The Mask cartoon series. I love the cartoon series. Mwah! I love it! But until they decided to make a sequel, but nothing like what they were planning, they decided to make The Abomination, Son of the Mask. That movie was a son of a... Sorry, I can't cuss in the video. I say this movie is abomination, and it should be destroyed. Home run! Woo! I didn't know my own strength. But the cartoon series, here's one thing is really interesting. The cartoon series was so popular that they made a row of action figures. And I remember I collected those action figures. I mean, heck, I have one ever since I was a child. Oh, look at this ugly face. Turn into something lot more comfortable. Now that's better. Look at this handsome devil. Huh? But of course, in the cartoon series, he had a new villain. And of course, besides Walter, there was Pretorius, a disembodied talking head who was so busy on conquering the world. Voiced by the great Tim Curry. So, we meet again. I am Pretorius. And I want to get rid of that mask once and for all. But with the power of the mask, my henchmen shall be an invincible fighting force. Ooh, a talking head! Master, I'm gonna fill your mouth out with bug spray. Meow. Don't smoke, kids. It's a killer. But here's one thing that was really sad in my childhood. You see, one time they did make a video game. They made a video game of The Mask for Super Nintendo. But sadly, poor Mr. Grimm don't have enough money to afford a Super Nintendo back then. But they made a Super Nintendo beat-em-up game called The Mask. So, what does anybody who didn't have enough money for a video game do? Do what everybody else does. He bought himself a board game, a 3D board game of The Mask. But unlike the video game, on this one you either play Stanley Ipkiz or The Mask, and all you do is go through the town and collect enough coins to go to the Coco Bungo Club to save the day. But it is a fun board game, that's for sure. But after the popularity of the cartoon and the movie, and that abomination called Son of the Mask, they decided to continue on making the Mask comics. So, they made this comic book. The Mask Strikes Back. In this one, there are 4 teenagers who found the mask. One put the mask on just to have fun. Oh boy, just wanna have fun. Oh boy, just wanna have fun. But of course, it's about one boy who wanted to be the big head killer. So he found himself a mask and had a lot of fun, until he decided that it was too much for him, so he took it off. While another one wanted to be a huge rock star, he puts on the mask, and he wanna rock and roll all night, and party every day. I wanna rock and roll all night, and party every day. And of course, there was that other teenager who was a real pothead. He puts on the mask and everything's going all, whoa, psychedelic, dude, whoa. But it was too much for him, so he took it off. And then there was a black kid who was a brainy nerd. He decided to do something very, very different. He puts on the mask and became a superhero. He decided to bring justice on the world, until Walter showed up once again. And he amused himself by putting a bunch of rusty nails, stabs it in his hand to form a smiley face, squeeze it, and blood comes out. But as Walter found the mask and the teenager who wore it, he battled against him until the kid finally took off his mask. And when Walter puts on the mask, nothing. It's just he's too much violent and too much dark that the mask just couldn't turn him into one. So he tossed the mask away. And that was the end of The Mask Strikes Again. But not for long. All of a sudden it got really dark and make this series of The Mask called The Hunt for Green October. And this is what the mask looks like in the comics. Yeah, I know, it was a stupid title to begin with, but hear it out. On this one, it's about a guy who has a little daughter. But of course, a strange thing about that comic, she kind of looks like my cousin, Amber. It's weird. Anyway, the problem is that the girl lost her mother. So after that, she couldn't talk for years. And everybody always kept complaining about her not talking. And even she's also picked by her teacher. Remember in the first issue of The Mask, Stanley Ipkiz found his teacher who teased at him and taunt him when he was a child? And what he did, he suffocated her by sticking his boot in her throat. But of course, in this one, it was about a group of neo-Nazi... a bunch of neo-Nazis, assassins, who's trying to find the mask so they can obtain the power. So the guy, with his non-talking daughter, decided to wear the mask and decided to have some fun with it. While at the same time, the daughter decided to dress up as the big head, they called him in the comic, and the teacher kicked him out. It's pretty dark. I mean, it's very, very dark, unlike the other Mask comics. Anyway, she found the mask, and she took some vengeance on the kids who made fun of her and laughed at her, and also the teachers who said bad things about her. But not in the horrible way like Stanley Ipkiz did. All she did is she just barfs at them. That's it. And had a lot of fun. And then all of a sudden, Calloway himself showed up. You know, Calloway always keeps showing up every time when somebody wear the mask. Anyway, they finally discovered that the neo-Nazis are planning to get the mask. So, the girl took off the mask and gave it back to her dad, and the dad finally saved the daughter and everybody and got rid of the terrorist organization. And that was the end of the mask. What the guy did, he didn't toss it away like everybody else did. He put the mask in a safety deposit box. But ever since the end of the Hunt for Green October, the mask always keeps showing up as a spin-off to all the DC comics. He even crossed over with a lot of DC characters, like Ghost, Barbed Wire, and so on. Heck, there is even a few comic books I have. He crosses, I mean, not I have, but I print out pictures of it, where the mask crosses over with the Grifter from WS Comics. And then he crosses over with DC, where he deals against this bounty hunter from another... an alien bounty hunter from another planet, Lobo. And then he crosses over again with another DC character called The Mask Meets Murphy Law. And then here's the most shocking one of all. This time the Mask crosses over with the DC universe, and he deals with Batman and becomes friends with the Joker, called Joker Mask. And now, the Mask will be remembered as a kid-friendly franchise on the animated series and the movie, while he's always be dark and gritty in the comic books. So, if you love seeing somebody saying smoking, or somebody who's literally smoking, you should check him out. And I also heard a rumor that somebody's planning to make a new Mask movie, and this time stick with the comic books, instead of making it kid-friendly like they did back then. But of course it would pee off some of the old-fashioned fans who never read the comics. But hey, that's life. That's life, that's what all people say. So, if you like seeing Jim Carrey saying smoking, or literally seeing somebody smoking from a blowtorch, check out these comics and the movie. You won't be disappointed. Now, for those of you who love my Mask review, please leave a comment down below, hit like, and subscribe. I don't know about you, but I am going to the Comic-Con in Main Street. That's right, I'm gonna have some fun. So, make sure my grandma has... Make sure my grandma have her 2-liter Coca-Cola, and don't wait up. The Mask is gonna paint the town tonight! Smoking!